This Choircast podcast is brought to you by The Collective. At The Collective, we believe that justice isn't optional, it's actually sacred. That's why we're building a growing library of progressive resources, connecting you with queer and Black-owned businesses, linking to books that challenge the status quo, and delivering content that empowers you to resist fascism with clarity and compassion. So join the movement. Support the mission. Visit The Collective, that's QUOLLECTIVE.com, The Collective, to learn more and get involved.
You've wandered into Snarky Faith, the place where American Christianity gets skewered, roasted, and served cold. Faith on the fringe, naming what's broken, keeping what matters. Strap in. This is Snarky Faith.
Previously on Snarky Faith.
My wife, right? I'm not telling you what to do, but it's my suggestion. It's what we do. I see it as our household vote, and that half of my vote was stolen from me in women's suffrage. And so my wife votes, but she votes alongside me. Correct. She votes my vote because what she's doing is, as a woman who fears the Lord and as a submissive wife, she's saying, evil men stole half of your vote and gave it to me, and I'm giving it back.
Welcome again to Snarky Faith. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney, and that, my friends, was nationalistic micro-penis pastor Joel Webben explaining why women scare him. Apparently, the only woman he can feel comfortable around is one that is safely contained in biblical submission, because a woman with a brain, with choices, and the ability to say no is a complicated theological problem. Christian nationalism is his beard. Listen to him again. He's saying it without saying it. It's a nationalistic two-step. Act tough, act godly. Remember, lobotomized chicks make the best trad wives. Which brings us to today's conversation, the joys of being a woman in a high-control religious environment. You know, the thing every little girl asks Santa for. Today I'm sitting down with Reverend Heather. She's a force of nature who calls out abuse, kicks ass, and gives a damn about people who are pushed to the margins. So let's get into her story, and it's a powerful one. Let's go. With me today is Heather Foy. Heather is a reverend, a writer, a podcast host who ministers to the unchurched, the questioning, and the deconstructing. After decades of religious spaces, she now walks alongside those finding their own way, outside the walls, beyond the dogma, and into something truer. She writes at The Collective and also co-hosts the Awakening podcast, which I've been on. Tons of fun. So welcome, Heather.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And it was so great having you on our show. So I was super excited to get invited onto yours because we like to talk about this stuff. So it's great.
It's fun. It's fun. Let's have fun with trauma today.
Yes. I always say that, these conversations we're healing loudly together, one story at a time, because it's through sharing our stories that we get to expose the harm. So I always love having an opportunity to do that.
Yes, and because I love what you do on your show, because what you do is you focus on surviving religious trauma and talk to folks that have been through that. So for you, like, where did it all begin? Like, what was the flavor of your trauma/tribe/denomination growing up? Where did it all start?
Okay, I grew up as a pastor's kid, so I was raised on the front pew of my dad's church, and I was raised Church of God. That my dad was a Church of God pastor for years, until he got voted out of the Church of God church. And when Dad got voted out, that was when we went on the trek of non-denominational. Okay. Dad's going to start his own church. And he did that. But he didn't do it in a traditional sense where I'm going to go find a church. No, my dad decides I'm going to build a church on the back of my home. So he turned the back of our home into a church. Okay. He built a church and a shelter onto the back of our family home. And when I was 12 years old, I was waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to make homeless people breakfast before I got on the school bus, because Dad worked second shift. So he would take second shift caring for the homeless people, so he would feed them dinner. My mom would do lunch most of the time, but I would do breakfast just about every morning before I got on the school bus. And that's what my upbringing was like. We were in and out of several different churches. I was exposed to several different denominations. But as I got older, my father got more involved in the faith and connected with some different people of faith. And that was where he kind of started going down more of the extremist path of Christianity. because that was when he came home and started telling us things like we couldn't listen to secular music anymore. We couldn't watch secular television programs. Now, mind you, my dad was a horribly abusive man. He would literally beat the hell out of my brother on Sunday and then preach about holiness on Monday. And there wasn't a soul in my home that wasn't abused by my father. He didn't physically, I always say he didn't physically abuse me, but he did. I don't remember it, honestly. My father did physically abuse me, but I don't remember it. I have blocked it out. But my older sibling does remember that abuse. He remembers what my dad did to me. I don't remember it. All I remember from my father was the mental and emotional abuse. And I tell people my first bullies were my father and my church. Those were my two first bullies, was my faith and my father. Because when I was in those developmental years of my life, and kids have awkward stages that they go through with their physical body and their appearance, well, my dad's way of making himself feel better was to pick on the people that were around him. He would point out your flaws, your failures, your physical features. So he would say things to me like, hey, Bucky Beaver, why don't you go in the backyard and gnaw down a tree? Or, no man's ever really going to want you. I mean, look at you. You're built like a stick. You're flat as a board. Now, I was an underdeveloped teen kid that was awkward as heck. So when you're telling a kid stuff like that, you are wrecking them.
Yeah.
And not only was my dad beating me down, but then my church is telling me that I was born human garbage, that my goodness would never amount to anything. And so much of that messaging, I internalized it for so long. But it really sucks because I didn't internalize it enough to where it woke me up. You know, I stayed in the Christian faith for many, many years. In fact, my father forced me into marriage at 16 years old because we were, again, a very extreme Christian household. I was having premarital sex with my boyfriend, and my father basically sat him down and said, "You're going to marry my daughter. Like, you cannot have the milk without buying the whole cow. You are going to make an honest woman out of my daughter after what it is that you have done to her." And my husband didn't coerce me or anything like that. But my dad, the way he made it sound like my husband was a predator, you know? And it's so messed up. And we were both good Christian kids. He was raised in a very strict Christian household too. So we both came from this environment. Our mothers were married young. Our grandmothers were married young. So for us, none of this was abnormal. This was all normal. This is just the way it's supposed to work. We knew we were doing wrong by having premarital sex. So we did. We got married. I was 16 years old. And before I was even 18, I had had 2 miscarriages that resulted in me having to have abortions. Because when you're in the church, you're told as a woman, your purpose is to get married and then be fruitful and multiply. So, of course, the first time I got pregnant, I was 16 and a half. I had been married for 6 months. It's time to get pregnant now. That's the next step. But I was a child. And I had the body of a child, and my child body could not carry that to term. And even with having those 2 losses, I wasn't allowed to grieve those losses properly. I was taught to just glaze over it and spiritually bypass everything. Just give it over to God and don't worry about it, and He'll handle everything. So a lot of that happened in my life. There was so much that was glazed over with the teachings of purity culture. Oh my gosh. I didn't even know that I had been raped when I was a child until my mom sat me down to have the talk about the birds and the bees with me. And I was like 10 or 12. I can't remember. Timelines are really skewed because I have so much trauma. But I had been SA'd when I was 8 years old, and I didn't even know what was happening to me at the time because I had no concept of sex. I had no concept of boundaries. I didn't know good touch, bad touch. I had no idea what predatory behavior was. I just knew that whenever somebody is in authority over you, you comply no matter what. You don't disobey. And I was an obedient child. My parents successfully broke my will to make me an obedient child. So when this adult was in this position over me, I, allowed them to do what they wanted to me. And it was all because I wanted to play the Nintendo. And I think about this, I was so innocent. I was such an innocent child. I literally wanted to play the Nintendo. We had gotten a new one, and I know I'm older, so this was back in the 80s, but I wanted to play, everybody else was playing. My older brother was playing. So I thought, man, I want to be able to play too. And this was a family member, and he's like, oh, I'll let you play the Nintendo. You just let me do this. I didn't know any better. I just knew I was going to get to play the Nintendo.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until my mom sat me down and had that talk with me that I was covered in shame. I thought I was absolutely worthless because up until that point that she had that conversation about the birds and the bees with me, I was told that my most precious possession was my virginity. Like I would be like worthless chewed up gum if I no longer had that. So when she had that conversation with me, I immediately internalized that you are nothing. You'll never be anything. And it wasn't until later on that I was brave enough to actually tell my family what had happened to me when I was much, much younger because I was so ashamed of it. I was probably 14 years old before I ever spoke it out into existence and told my family about it because I was so ashamed. And nothing became of it. Nothing became of what happened to me. It was, we don't talk about this.
Oh, gosh.
We don't talk about this outside of the house. And that's the way it was with all the abuse in my family. We didn't talk about it outside. And the reality is when my dad would go outside, oh, he could be the most gracious, kind, caring, compassionate man you have ever met. All the people that he goes to church with now will gas him up and say, what a great man he is. But what those people don't know is how abusive he is behind the scenes. How he not only abused me and my brother, but he also abused my own children. I have, a child that literally had to go to therapy and unpack the harm from the things that her grandpa had done to her because the way that he mentally and emotionally traumatizes people. And I had to get to a point where I was like, no, we're not going to allow you to traumatize a third generation in this family, So I really had a heart for loving people. And that's what really started to lead me on my journey of deconstruction because I stayed in the church. My husband and I served in ministry for a long time. He was a worship leader and I would preach and teach. And honestly, I had started off just by teaching the kids in children's church. But I wanted to become an evangelist. And I remember talking to some women at a church that we were going to at the time, and it was an evangelical church. And I remember telling them that I was going to become an evangelist one day. And I still remember to this day, those women laughing at me. They thought it was so funny. And I think back on it now because I was so offended in the moment that they were mocking me. But it's because they thought of themselves that small that they didn't think I could ever be that big, that I could ever do that. But I was determined, you know what? I'm going to do this anyhow. So I ended up leaving that church so I could start pursuing this. But God started saying, I say God, but I literally just say it's the universe, started sending queer people into my life. I had never encountered queer people before, and they just started showing up in my life. And the more time I started spending with them, the more I started realizing, wait a minute. They're not perverts. They're not demonic. They're not all these labels that the church had put on them. And that's when I knew I really got to dig in with studying more of the word. Like I'm out here preaching and teaching this stuff, and I can't keep preaching and teaching this if I'm not preaching and teaching truth or if I'm preaching and teaching things that are actively causing harm. So that sent me down to start going to school and studying theology, and that wrecked me. That wrecked my faith. It ended up leading to the point where my mind shattered. That's what happened to me. That was my exit from the church was such a grand thing, but my mind shattered. And it's because I couldn't hold the reality of what I'd been taught, what I'd been taught as truth and what I now knew to be truth, and all of the lies that I had told over the years. And because I took ministry seriously, so serious that, I was so hardcore about making sure that, when I was putting my sermons together, that I wasn't saying things that would be harmful or hurtful. So when I learned that I was actually doing the opposite of what it is I had originally set out to do, God, it tore me up. It tore me up to learn that I was the villain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it did. It shattered my mind. And at that time, I was serving in ministry, and I was kind of looked up to by several people in the church. And my leaders at the church at that time did not handle the situation appropriately at all. When I came back out of the hospital, my pastor and his wife basically went on a PR campaign. And we are going to handle this ourselves. And that's exactly what they told the entirety of the church staff. There were even a few staff members that didn't even know what had happened to me at all. They were just completely left out of the loop. And it was because they wanted to keep it hush-hush. They didn't want everybody to know that the person that they had had on the platform for the past year and a half just lost their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So they tried to cover it up. That's exactly what they did. They did a cover up. They hid it, swept it under the rug. But I was still in a serious mental health crisis at that moment. And I kept trying to reach out to my leaders, for help. And most of them wouldn't even pick up the phone. And the pastor and his wife had said, well, we're going to counsel her. We want to counsel you. We want to counsel your husband. And neither one of them are therapists or psychologists. She was a nurse and he's a pastor. So neither one of them were qualified for that. And what they did is more damage. And every time I'd ever experienced Christian counseling of any kind, that's all they ever did is more damage, because I had mental health issues in the church. Like, I struggled with suicidal thoughts for about 10 years straight before this occurred. Okay. So I literally was about to jump off the bridge when I took myself to the hospital. So when I was reaching out to these people for help and they're not even answering their phone, that was it for me. Like, it literally was it. And then it was about a week after that, one of my other pastors that was literally, I considered this a really close friend of mine, called me up. Hey, do you want to go get some coffee? So that's exactly what happened. Told the story of what happened to me, and I never heard from her again. Never. It was like she just came to get the gossip. That was all she was there for, was to get the gossip so she could take it back to the church and run her mouth to the prayer circle. And that was it. Like, she literally washed her hands of me and it was over. And I knew from that point on that it wasn't ever going to be the same for us in church again, because every single church my husband and I had ever been a part of, we had been hurt in one way or another by leadership being deceitful, hypocritical, or manipulative. And this church was literally the last straw for us. And when we walked out of that church, that was the end. My husband, he completely laid everything down, walked away, and hasn't even ever really thought about it again. He's like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe it anymore. Wash my hands. He doesn't talk about it. No, he's just like, yeah, them people are crazy. But me, I had to know why. I had to know how it was possible for me to be manipulated and harmed and abused, and nobody to be talking about this, nobody to be doing anything about it. Because when I first started deconstructing, there weren't all these spaces, right?
Yeah.
So I felt like I was all on my own. And when I found like the new evangelicals, I was so excited just about finding a group of people that had been through this process. Because, where I come from, you don't talk about leaving the church. You don't talk about walking away from God. You don't talk about having questions or fears or doubts. So just finding a community was so powerful. And the more I started listening to other people talking, I was like, I have to start speaking up. I have to start shining light on all of this harm, because again, I was part of this system for 36 years and I didn't even know that the doctrine of hell was made up, right? Like, I didn't even know that that was false doctrine. So learning stuff like that as an adult, and after you've been indoctrinated all that, it frustrates you. It makes you angry. And because I had so much rage inside of me, I had to channel it into something positive so I wouldn't burn everything down. So that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at,
So you went through all of that. You're like, this isn't for me anymore. I'm going to, you're still going through seminary. But what keeps you there? Because you're you're Reverend now, right?
Yes,
'Cause
I am
think that's-
still a Reverend.
Yeah.
And I do definitely want to explain that because I do not identify as a Christian anymore. When I started my deconstruction process, I actually deconstructed out of evangelical Christianity and I moved over to the ancient Celtic church. And I got ordained through them because I had previously been ordained through my father's ministry. But I felt like I needed to cut all ties with that, which is why I got ordained underneath of a more progressive church. Because if I wanted to be ordained, I was definitely going to be ordained underneath an institution that is fully affirming, cares about human rights, things like that. And I was part of the ancient Celtic church for a couple of years. And then I was still deconstructing while I was part of the ancient Celtic church. And I finally got to the point where I was like, yeah, I think the last piece of my deconstruction is actually deconstructing Jesus. Because I had never deconstructed Jesus. So I deconstructed Jesus. And now I'm no longer a Christian, but I am still a Reverend. And I still call myself a Reverend because I still ordain people or I still marry people. I still do, funerals, weddings, all that stuff. But I also minister to people that are unchurched and walking through their deconstruction journey. I don't tell people what to believe about the world around them. That is not my purpose. My purpose is to support you while you're walking through this journey. So when people hear Reverend, they automatically think of, Christian and a pastor of a church. But I am a pastor or a preacher to the wayward souls that are out there. I always say I'm here for all the people that the church doesn't like to, minister to or acknowledge or love. That's my job. And I earned the title Reverend. So even though I don't pastor in a church, I'm never going to walk away from calling myself that. I put in the work.
Love it.
I will always be a Reverend. I'm agnostic now. I'm Christian. I'm not Christian, And it took me a long time to actually admit that, to say I'm not Christian because I was so scared. I was. And even though I have deconstructed for so long and I know that Christianity is nothing like, the ministry of Jesus, it just isn't. But for me, it was a moral thing. Like I could no longer call myself a Christian and separate myself from the harm. Because you can't label yourself as a Christian without being connected to that harm in some way. Like there is no distancing yourself from it. And for me, I just couldn't do that anymore. So I was like, yeah, I'm not a Christian anymore. I'm just a person who loves others well.
Because that's really what it's supposed to be about anyways, right?
And really that's what I'm here for. Like I always tell people, what drives you? Love. That is what has always driven me. It is what has driven me right out of the church because there's just not enough room for it in those spaces unless there's conditions on it, right? But that's not love. When you have to put all these conditions on your love, then you're not showing up for people. You're showing up for your own ego instead.
Now, for the people that you talk with on your show and the people that you minister with too, a lot of times we end up seeing this heavy shame the church gives us.
Yes.
This whole like mantle that we're broken. What are those patterns that you keep seeing in person to person to person that you see like repeating in the people that you're talking about?
Shame is the big one.
Okay.
Every single guest that we have ever had on the show, that is the number one problem that they deal with. And we actually had a therapist on a couple of months ago, and he said it's the same thing for him as being a therapist. His clients that come into his office, it is the hardest thing for people to break off of them is toxic shame. And it's because when you're given a foundation of shame, it's so hard to view yourself as good. It's so hard to view yourself as worthy and capable and being confident in what it is that you are able to achieve on your own doing, your own merit or your own intelligence. Because again, you're told that you can't do anything without God. You can't, get a degree without God. You can't buy a house without God. You can't get a car without God. So when you're taught these things, you literally feel like, I am nothing. I can't do anything on my own. I am totally incapable. So it's not just the shame, but it is that self-doubt, that feeling like I cannot become something. I cannot do great things. Or even people are just like, I can't use my voice like you do because, I don't think people will take me seriously because they doubt themselves. And it's not because they don't know what it is that they've experienced. It's just that they don't think anybody will hear them, you know? And that's a big thing. It is fear. There's a lot of fear and a lot of shame. And those are the repetitive things. And the crazy part is I've been out for 10 years almost, but there are still things that will pop up. Like I was going through the drive-thru the other day, and we used to have fundy voices that we would use in church. We had these voices because we were told that we were supposed to speak soft and kind and sweet. And I can go back and listen to videos of me preaching, and I'm like, who is that? And when I was going through the drive-thru the other day, I used that voice, and I was like, why did you just do that right now? Like, right? But it's still there. It's still embedded in me. And it's like, that's my nice customer service, people-pleasing voice. But I used to perform in that voice all the time. And that's so much of what my Christianity was nothing but a performance. Because you have to perform holiness and perfection when you're outside of the house. So you don't have authentic relationships because you can't share your fears with them. You can't share your struggles with them. Because everything you share with them can be used against you in one way or another. It'll either be talked about in the prayer circle, or they'll use it against you when it comes to ministry. Oh, well, we can't put you in this position because you were just doubting this last week, and we just don't know if we could trust you.
It is. It's almost like I feel like the trauma they give us sometimes feels like we once we walk away from it, it needs to be exorcised out of us.
Yes, absolutely.
Demon, get out of her.
And I'm literally in trauma therapy and getting angry, just angry because, of course, thinking about just having those, 2 abortions and miscarriages when I was not even 18 years old and not even being allowed to grieve that in a normal way because we were cut off from our emotions. We were taught feelings were dangerous. So we weren't allowed to feel things like anger or rage or anything like that. And just that made me so angry because it's like so much was robbed from us. Like I didn't have a normal childhood. I grew up underneath a microscope. Every time I left the house, people were waiting for me to fail because I was the pastor's kid. Everything you do is analyzed when you are a pastor's kid. So you have to be perfect outside of the house. Or if you're not, you have to pretend that you are. And that never changed as I got older. I was living with raging depression and couldn't talk about it because I had a pastor's wife that literally told me that I was coming into agreement with the devil by taking my antidepressants. I didn't listen to her, thank God, because I was having severe postpartum depression, But my goodness, I had 4 kids at home and I was only 25. Oof. That would give anybody depression.
But it's amazing how like in those situations, because my background's not exactly like yours, but it is trauma and all this other stuff with religion. It ends up dehumanizing us that are in these situations, and I think it's one of the things that a lot of people don't always completely understand. That it's almost like you don't have feelings, you don't have a gut. You don't really have opinions. Everything is just God is everywhere and watching us constantly. The church is watching us constantly. And so it creates this anxiety, paranoia that, oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually have PTSD as a result of my religious trauma. And it is because of that heightened anxiety and self-policing. And I always say this, the church would not stay in business if it wasn't for fear and shame. Those are the 2 things that keep it in business. And the reality is when you instill this in people, they police themselves, but they also police everybody around them. So they're always analyzing and criticizing everything. Like they're not looking for the good. When I was a Christian, as soon as I would meet somebody new, I was looking for your sin. How can I write you off? And that's exactly what I would look for. He said he had a beer last week. That's it right there. Can't talk to Stuart no more. What does business does light have to do with darkness? Stuart, you are the darkness. You drank a beer.
I've been told that many times. Now, for you too, and with folks that you talk to, what do you think? What are misunderstandings that people that haven't been around this situation, like what are things that people that haven't experienced all of this, what would they misunderstand about what we've been through?
It's so frustrating when I talk to people who haven't, especially if they are in the church. Because the reality is that there are a lot of traumatized people that are in these spaces that don't even know that they're traumatized. They don't know that they have been abused. They don't know that they've been manipulated. And I think that's really hard. But for people that don't get it, I would say listen to people, listen to their lived experiences, listen to their stories, and try to view their story through their eyes, not through the lens of what it is you already think you know. Because when we view other people's trauma through our own experiences, we don't view it fairly. If I had a good experience in the church and I view somebody's religious trauma through my church experience, I'm going to write off what it is that they've experienced. I'm going to want to write off the harm that they've experienced because I didn't experience it the same way. That didn't happen to me. That didn't happen to my family, And it's always people that have actually been traumatized that love to say that. They're just not aware of their trauma, And I see it in things like when people say, oh, we need to pray right now. The devil's getting ready to come on me. That's trauma. Yeah. You're having an anxiety issue right there. When you have fear of the devil, that's trauma.
Yeah.
But that's the hardest thing is, for people to really sit and have empathy and compassion for people. And it's really hard to have that when you're in religious spaces because they take that from you.
I know. And it's interesting, though, for those of us that like to call out a lot of the BS that is happening, people will freak out because it's almost like you're playing Jenga with their beliefs.
Yes.
In that, so where they will defend those beliefs because if you start pulling too hard, everything's going to crash down for them. And there's some part of their soul that they somehow know that to be true, even though they won't admit it to themselves.
And what I find is that they typically, turn inward and they double down with their beliefs and go even harder into it instead of examining, what it is that they believe. But also, I remember when the first time I had questions about being gay, in the Bible, and I went on the internet. Well, the first few Google searches you get is, affirming that homosexuality is a sin instead of the actual theological, in-depth stuff that you get. So you have to really dig to find the right answers. And they don't know how to dig for nothing. They're used to being, hand-fed from the pulpit every Sunday. And that's the problem is they don't study the Bible in the proper context and their pastors haven't studied it in the proper context. So when you bring it to them with the theological study, they think you're just making stuff up. Oh, you're making that up just to justify your own sin, know? And it's like, no, honey, we studied it. You didn't.
Because sometimes it does. It feels like a lot of intellectual laziness. I feel like that what we've taught people in the pews. Basically, don't think too hard. Just memorize, and we'll tell you what you need to know.
Well, it's
and
like
that's
inerrancy.
Yeah.
We had that handed to us, and that there was nothing wrong with the Bible, no errors. Hell, when you go to Bible college, it's the first thing you learn is the errors that are in the Bible. Like, don't ever believe that this is a perfect book, and just that. Learning that shook me because I had been told my whole life that every word in that book was 100% gospel truth, no contradictions in it whatsoever. And as soon as I started seeing that stuff, I couldn't unsee it no more. I couldn't unsee the many ways that it has been used and weaponized against people, and the things that it's been used to justify.
Yeah. It's amazing, but for me, like going through seminary, it kind of created this weird glee, or maybe it was a sick glee within me because I was like, it was like just more, because it was just interesting being able to look at it differently, but being around other pastors that were like, you would see them start to melt down a little bit in their minds, and then be like, let's just contain this and put it in a box and just kind of put this over here and never think about it again.
Never think about it.
Don't integrate this into the system. Yeah,
that's exactly what my father did.
Yeah.
Let's put it in a box, never think about it again, and then we are going even more hardcore into what we think we already know.
Yeah.
And he went to Bible college in the 80s. Like so much has changed theologically since then. And he literally only went through a 6-month course or something like that. Like he didn't even do a major thing. So he's been preaching all these years from a 6-month course that he took back in the 80s. So God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies the called.
I always love that circular bullshit that they would throw out. And like, it sounds great.
The Holy
It sounds
Spirit
great from
can
the pulpit.
interpret the
Oh yeah.
scripture for you.
Oh yeah.
That's one of my favorites because it's
I
like,
know.
honey, the Holy Spirit's making you dumber, not smarter. Then
So for you, like walking through this and then walking out of it, in I guess a lot of us that have experienced that kind of trauma, we're always walking out of it a bit, or we're always probably still healing
yeah,
bits of childhood. But for you, once you stopped defining yourself as broken, like what came next?
empowerment.
Mm.
That's what came next. It was knowing that I am able to go out here and just be as badass as I need to be.
Mm.
And for me, it was such a huge thing to feel that because I had never felt empowered my entire life. But it was just like, yeah, nothing's holding me back now but me,
Mm.
you know? So let's do it. Let's go for it. And yeah, now we're here.
Now,
Now,
how's this process been for your kids? Like, was it like, were they raised
So-
like in and around it, and then it was like,
yes.
yeah,
So
whiplash?
I have, my children are all adults now,
Mhm.
thank God. But we were, all heavy into the church. And my kids were just starting high school. The older ones were when we left the church. So, and they didn't really understand what was going on. We didn't talk to them a whole lot about what was going on at first. We just started quietly deconstructing. But the longer we stayed out of the church, of course, there were more questions. And we just started being honest and open with them about what was going on and the processes that we were going through. And, as I got more and more deconstructed, I was like, listen, you guys are free to believe whatever you want to believe. And each of my children has deconstructed on their own. They no longer have a desire to engage with faith whatsoever or even have conversations about it. And I'm totally cool with that. Like, if you don't want anything to do with that, that is totally you. Nobody has to go out here and do everything that I'm doing, right? I would actually be disappointed probably if they said that they were Christian. And I know that's terrible, but that's because I'd be so terrified that they would end up on the extremist side of it. But I
Yeah.
don't think my kids would. But it was really scary at first
Mhm.
because I was afraid that it would break up our family,
Mm.
right? Because if there's that one person that's really so hardcore on keeping those beliefs, it might wreck everything. It really
Mhm.
could. But I didn't lose my immediate family, not my kids, not my husband. We all made through it together, but there were other family members that we definitely lost in the church divorce. Sister-in-laws, brother-in-laws, things like that. I have lost them in the divorce. But that's because they are extreme fundamental MAGA Christians and they cannot respect boundaries when I, say like we can't have conversations of faith because we are have such different beliefs and the things that they believe are harmful and traumatizing.
Yeah.
And I still am healing. So I don't like to subject myself or be in community with people that do not know how to respect those boundaries, don't know
Yeah.
how to push their beliefs onto people. So yeah, it has cost a lot,
Mhm.
my entire religious community. I lost every one of those people, but I'm not sad that I lost them because the reality is that I didn't have like meaningful, really solid relationships until after I left religious spaces. Because people in religious places really struggle with showing up for themselves.
Mhm.
And because of that, they don't really know how to show up in a healthy manner for people that they're in community with.
Good point.
So it actually took me leaving the church to find people that were healthy to be in community with as well. And now I have chosen family and I'm so grateful for them because they're just the most amazing people I've ever, had in my life. So
It's interesting when we begin to walk out the kind of conversations you can have with people that we didn't feel like we could have as
Yes.
much in the church. The honesty
Yes.
that you can just be, okay, I'm thinking this, and you're not going to
Exactly.
worry about policing whatever's in my mind,
exactly.
which is kind of how the church
Yes.
works. Yeah.
Or
yeah.
you don't feel like you're going to be, judged for everything that you've done wrong. Like I literally, if I had an addiction issue, which I don't, but if I did, I know that I could call up one of my friends and be like, hey, I'm struggling with this,
Mhm.
Could you help me out? And they would,
Mhm.
Whereas in religious spaces, they're going to be like, oh, you need to read your Bible and pray more. God's going to send you to hell if you don't take care of that. Well, that's not help, honey.
Mhm.
That's just adding more shame on a person that's already struggling.
Yeah.
Like you're making the problem worse.
Yeah. Now, for you and on the podcast too, because I know that you continue to hear story after story of trauma and what's
Yes.
happened to people that are carrying similar wounds to a lot of us. But
Yes.
what gives you hope in walking through all of this and hearing all of these things? Yeah.
What gives me hope is the more people that continue to speak up
Mm,
and share their stories,
mm,
and more spaces like this popping up, more people writing books. That is what gives me hope. I do see a lot of darkness. I hear a lot of horrible stories. I mean, my goodness, we had a guest on last week and her story, I don't even know how those people are even out of prison. Like,
mm.
she was literally raped on a regular basis, and her aunt had the minister come over to discipline her. And his way of disciplining her was to rub olive oil all over her body, quote scripture, and SA her at the same time. And this would happen once or twice a week for this little girl. So, how do I deal with it? It's knowing that people like that are having a space where they can share their truth once and for all, where these monsters are still existing, still in these churches, still preaching, still teaching. We're exposing them one story at a time. And that gives me hope. And it makes me proud that I can provide a space for them to share that truth.
I love that.
Because people don't realize how many of these churches are still up and running, and these people are still alive that do these monstrous things, and they are still in ministry that do these monstrous things. And they also don't realize how many people in their churches know that they do these monstrous things, and they look the other way. So what gives me hope is just knowing that there are more and more people that are exposing all of it, because that's all we got. All we got is the voices and the survivors and, this medical data now. Like, we have religious trauma is actually a classification by psychologists now, which is so incredible because that wasn't a thing 10 years ago, So just having that acknowledged as religious trauma is real and valid is so important, and it gives me so much hope.
Yeah, it was funny. Like I remember the first time I even spoke to a therapist, it took like just a few moments. They're like, talk to me about your background. And then it was just one of those, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
You've been through religious abuse along with others
Yes.
as well too. And it was just like, and I was like, that's a thing?
Yeah.
I've been a pastor. I've been in ministry, huh? Yeah.
And they're like, yep, that explains it.
It was so quick, and it was just weird. There was like, it's that obvious to you, so it probably should be obvious to me. And yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I love the way you said it's so much more eloquent, the hopefulness of it, because it just leaves me with like something in my heart, like let's burn this motherfucker down.
Burn it. That's
just burn it down.
See, when I first, started learning the truth about things, that's how I felt. I wanted, like, if you go back and watch my earlier videos on TikTok, I was pretty hot and heavy. I was a little angry. But I have calmed down since, matured a little, grown, a little bit more into myself. I try not to be as mean.
There's days. I have days.
There are days.
Yeah. So Heather, what would you tell someone that is like listening to this, that may be in that space where you were at one point, starting just to question messages that they've heard their entire life? What would you tell them?
Find community. That's so important. There are so many deconstruction spaces and groups. Find somewhere that's safe to ask questions. Also, go to therapy, dude. You need therapy. I suggest it to everybody because if you've ever been in a Christian environment, like, you have been traumatized in some way or another, that messaging harms you. And therapy is so helpful. Like, it is such a beautiful journey to go on because you can reconnect with your body and you can show up better for yourself, better for other people, and you can heal. Like, I never really experienced joy like I do now, right? Like, and just love and just being able to care for myself in a better way until I went to therapy and started healing. So I think those things are so important. But I also want to tell you, it's going to be a hard road. And I'm not going to lie about that, because deconstruction is one of the hardest journeys you will ever walk on. But it doesn't mean destruction. It doesn't mean that you are taking TNT and blowing up everything in your entire life. What you're blowing up is the things that were not yours to begin with.
Yeah.
You're sorting through the wreckage to find out what pieces you actually want to hold and carry into your future. But it's an opportunity for you to decide which one of those pieces that you want to take with you and which one should just be left behind. And that's the thing that Christianity gave us. It gave us all the pieces and it gave us all the certainty. But somebody's pre-planned program is not a one-size-fits-all. So there are going to be things within that program that do not fit you. And, for me, one of those things was, homosexuality, like being gay is a sin. Guess what? I'm bisexual, y'all. I didn't find that out until I went to therapy. You know how awkward it is sitting in therapy, telling a, therapist that, well, I've always thought women are pretty, I've always thought they're attractive. And she looked at me and she said, honey, you do know that people don't typically find the same sex attractive unless they're gay, right? I was in denial at first. But yeah, I've always been bisexual. I just didn't know it. I thought everybody thought girls were hot.
But that's the huge importance of actually going to a therapist and not like a Christian counselor, like we mentioned before, too.
Christian counseling, do not ever do it. It is trauma upon trauma. It's why I stayed out of therapy for so long, because I was so traumatized in Christian counseling, like so badly traumatized by it. Yeah.
Well, Heather, Reverend Heather, if people want to find you, if people want to see your work, see what you're doing, how do they go about doing that?
You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me at the Awakening Podcast. We put out a new episode every single week. Stuart can share our links, but you can find me in all kinds of places. I'd be happy to have you all there. And if you ever have any questions about deconstruction, send me a message. I'm always here. I leave myself open for y'all. If you ever have any questions, I'm here to walk alongside the journey with you. You don't have to go it alone.
Well, Heather, thanks so much for your time and just the work that you're doing too, bringing joy out into the world, telling people that they're not broken. And,
thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much, Stuart. It's awesome.
Excellent.
The end times are upon us. The signs are happening. The end is near, but don't panic. You may have missed the rapture, but there's still time to prepare for what comes next. Disasters, plagues, celestial malfunctions. Consider them friendly reminders. Now's the time to prepare. From homemade hazmat suits to heavenly currency and trustworthy prophets, this guide has you covered. Because when the heavens open and the world melts, belief alone won't save you. The Tribulation Survival Guide. How to stay alive when everything else is dead. Available now.
This Choircast podcast is being brought to you by Rituals for Heretics. For millennia, people have been meeting deep psychological needs through religious ritual and meditation practices. Rituals for Heretics takes rituals and meditation practices from all kinds of religions and deletes the God part of it while leaving the psychological work that is being done so that you can put whatever you believe or don't believe about God back into the ritual or meditation practices. Get your copy today on Amazon or wherever you purchase books.